YouTube, my name is Danica and today I have my January wrap-up. So this January I read 7 books, so I'll just let you know what they were and a couple of my thoughts about them. The first book I read this month was The Rebellion of Miss Lucy Ann Lobdell by William Clayburgh, and this is a fictionalized memoir, so it's based on the true story of Lucy Ann Lobdell, but the author sort of filled in some of the holes with her story and gave it a little bit more depth. I had a lot of conflicting feelings about this book. I will link my review at the Lesbrary down below. I think it had to do with this being a fictionalized memoir because on the one hand I wanted to hold it to what I would think fiction should look like and what a plot should look like, but on the other hand that can't really work with someone's real life. So I liked it, but I didn't love this one. I definitely go into a lot more depth in my review, so if you're interested I suggest you check that out. The second and third books I read in January were more Lemony Snicket books. After I finished the Series of Unfortunate Events in December, I picked up the Beatrice letters as well as the Unauthorized Autobiography of Lemony Snicket, and those were both interesting. The Unauthorized Autobiography I think would have been better if you haven't finished the series yet, the Series of Unfortunate Events. If you kind of pick it up maybe 4 books along or something, I think it gives a lot of tantalizing hints for later in the series, but having finished the series it didn't really add anything, so that one I didn't enjoy as much. The Beatrice letters I did like, however, and that would be a good one to read after you finish the series. Actually, definitely read it after you finish the series or it will make no sense at all. And that was a really short read, but it was interesting and I think it added something to the series. Actually, now that I look at my Goodreads, because I'm just basing this off my Goodreads, I think it skipped a book or I forgot to record one because I did read 2 of the All the Wrong Questions books that Lemony Snicket wrote, but it's only recording me having read 1, so that's weird. Maybe I'll add that now. Anyway, I read both of those and I did not find them, even though that's only half of this series, I didn't find it nearly as interesting as the Series of Unfortunate Events. It should have been exactly what I was looking for because it's actually about Lemony Snicket being part of the VFD, and that was what I found so interesting in a Series of Unfortunate Events. But I felt like it had none of the subtlety of a Series of Unfortunate Events, and it all takes place in the same place, and I didn't find it as interesting a setting to support that. So that one I didn't like as much. It was okay, but I won't be continuing with the series. And then I finished the audiobook of Jane Eyre for the first time, by Charlotte Bronte, obviously. And everyone talks about how this is their favorite classic and how they adore this book. And I liked it, but again, it wasn't one that I loved. I can understand why people love Jane as a character. There were moments where I was really grinning as I listened to it because she can be so strong. But other than that, I wasn't that taken with it. I liked it, but it's not one that I would go back to, and I'm still kind of feeling like I don't quite understand why this is such a close favorite to so many people. I feel like I missed something, which is sad. Maybe it's because I listened to the audiobook and so I didn't really get the effect of the writing, because a lot of people really love the way it's written and I was just listening to it, so I didn't really get to absorb that the same way. But I'm glad that I did read it / listen to it so that I have done it, but it wasn't a favorite of mine. Next, I picked up a book of poetry that was sent to me for review, and it was Sisterhood by Julie R. Enzer. Poetry can be really hit or miss for me, but this one I loved. It's a fantastic book of poetry. Again, I have a review at the Lesbrary, and as I said in that review, I keep wanting to quote things to show you how great the poetry is, but I can't really quote any of the poems in part. They are as short as they can be. I can't just take parts out of it and it won't make much sense, but I highly recommend picking this one up if you're at all interested in poetry. It was one I really enjoyed. And the last book I read in January was The Eyre Affair by Jasper Fforde. It was kind of a random pick for me. I sort of picked a random number and went along my bookshelf and this was it, which was funny because I wanted to read this book for a long time, but I thought I should read Jane Eyre before I read this book, and then immediately after I read Jane Eyre, it kind of randomly came up. And man, January was kind of a disappointing month for me, I think, because this is another one that I wanted to love, and I didn't. I had a lot of issues with it. Mostly I just didn't feel compelled. I didn't realize that this was set in the 1980s UK. I knew it was kind of like an alternate history where people are super into literature and there's a lot of literary references, and I was very excited about that. But I didn't realize that it was also alternate history in the sense that they're having a war with Russia that's gone on for 100 years. And also they do genetic manipulation that means that they all have pet dodos. And sometimes people travel back and forth in time, as well as there being this slippage between fiction and reality. There's also this villain that apparently is like part demon or something. It didn't seem to be cohesive. It didn't seem to come together. It was a lot of stuff just like thrown at you. And the core of the story around Thursday Next, the main character chasing after this villain, I didn't find that interesting because I really dislike villains that are just evil for the sake of it. They're just terrible people and they just want to do terrible things. I find that really boring. I'd rather have a villain that actually has some sort of logic or some sort of compelling reason to do the things that they're doing. And then the love interest storyline was also one that I didn't feel like had any depth and I wasn't invested at all. So I liked the literature references. I especially liked one aspect where they are watching a Shakespeare play that apparently the same Richard III Shakespeare play is put on every week in this theater, and they just pull people from the audience to play the different characters because they've all seen it so many times that they can do that. And then it's kind of like a Rocky Horror type viewing experience because everyone will shout out suggestions or taglines and there's actions that everyone takes at the same time, and that was my favorite part of the whole book. It just was so fun. It's the idea of there being such a huge fandom for classic literature. So even though I really liked the literature references in the Eyre Affair, there was just way too much else going on that I didn't find interesting, so it wasn't one of my favorites, and I won't be continuing with this series. But I do think that's sort of personal preference for me, so if you are interested in it, I do suggest you still pick it up and see if it's your style. It just wasn't mine. So that was my January. Those were all the books I read. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you think about them or what you read in January. If you have a wrap-up video yourself, feel free to leave it linked down below and I'll definitely check it out. And thanks for watching.